Um, this is a nice interview by Lang Wheeler, or get some of the history of the Weekapaug in. And seeing as I'm one of the oldest living people that has to do with the inn, why, I was chosen to put in my oar, I think. So I think that now that everything is set and ready to go.
Well, let's see if we're.
I'm Sydney Hinkle Buffum, and I'm here because I'm just about the oldest living person who remembers the new inn, not the old inn. I'm not that old. But anyway, I met Bob, who was Buffum, Robert Buffum, when I was at Smith College, and he was at Trinity. And his dad, Fred Buffum, and his wife, Margaret Cottrell Buffum, built this new inn that we're looking at after the '38 hurricane destroyed the old inn, which was on the beach. Now that history is all in Bob's book, and he is the real historian. And so this book is the one that people should be interested in. Now I will be using this as my text, although some of it is from my own memory. I first met Bob on a blind date when I was at Smith College in 1950, and he was at Trinity, and so he brought me to the inn, asked me to come down and visit his family at the inn. And the Buffum seniors, Frederick and Margaret, had their own house, which they always did. They never lived in the inn itself. And so I would come down and visit him on weekends, and then he'd come and visit me. It was very nice in the 50s, early 50s, late 40s actually. It seemed like a very big hotel to me. I wasn't used to hotels, full of elderly white-haired people. But there also were families with young children as well. Now, of course, it doesn't seem as big anymore, life's perspective. But back then, most of the guests knew one another, or so, because they were repeats, and some repeated for the whole season, and some repeated by the month. So we had people coming and going, but they at least usually had some connection with one another. And that is probably a little different than today. Today, the guest list is more varied and it is not as consistent. However, today as we walked in, and Buffy and I, to have our interview with Lang, we met the Seebecks. And Fred and Marion Seebeck were old guests of ours, and we've met their children and their grandchildren. So it still does, life still does repeat, and they're just enjoying themselves beyond belief at this lovely new inn. Now the days were, the beautiful weather was just about the same. We've had a fabulous summer. And the only difference being that on the lawn, right after breakfast, all the gentlemen would gather, and they would play bocce bowling. And the ladies watched from the upper deck, which is still there, and would do their needlepoint and knitting. Of course, some guests played tennis on the tennis courts. Mrs. Purcell played, as many people still around here these days would remember. While her husband played golf at the Miss Quantico Golf Club. About 11 a.m., most of the guests would go down to the bathhouse. They changed down there for swimming, and they walked on the beach, or they swam, or they sat in their chairs and under umbrellas, which the inn provided.
Sid, sorry. Talk to the camera, too.
Oh, yes. Well,
Yeah,
I'm using my notes. I know.
Okay.
Let's see. Of course, I'm reading from notes because obviously I'm going to forget things, and I don't want to do that. As I think the day. The day would be afternoon full of walks or bridge, and then before, in the 60s, cocktails were consumed in the bedrooms. Now, cocktails were something new in the new inn. Don't believe they had them in the old inn. But the bellhops were seen running up and down the halls with buckets of ice. Everybody drank in their rooms, and they sat on the beds, and so consequently the beds went to pieces quite quickly. Most of the guests had their own tables in the dining room, and they ate. But Thursday night was an exception. On Thursday nights, we had a cookout, and everybody would come down the stairs to the of a grassy knoll, and Mr. and Mrs. Grandy would put on these big kitchen aprons, and it was a big deal. They used to put them around, and it was sometimes a little difficult to get it around some of these bigger gentlemen, but that was your job. So when we took over the inn, we had to take over that chore as well. And it was fun. We, of course, had lobster or steak that night. It was informal, and everybody sat out on picnic tables, and it was a great deal of fun. The cooker is still there, and they could still be doing cookouts. I think they do on some nights of the week. There were usually movies or bingo or dances, and the community would sometimes come, and for the bingo, the games got so large they were crowding out the older people and guests, and so the yacht club took over, which made it a little bit easier, although we still had people coming because, of course, the inn had a great deal higher prize than the yacht club. $1 or $2 was the highest I think they got at the yacht club, where they'd get $10, $15, and maybe $50 at the Weekapaug Inn if they won the coverall. They also had dances, music on Saturday nights, occasionally during the season, and everybody in the community would come. The children would come usually, and that was a big event. They did the bunny hop, the conga line all around the outside of the inn and back in the doors. It was a great deal of fun. And unfortunately, I don't think we really do that, but they do have a wonderful party now, which Bob and I started, I think, to raise money. And it was for the Weekapaug Inn Foundation, Weekapaug Foundation for Conservation, and they held it at the Weekapaug Inn. So that is a nice tradition, which is continuing. And now let's see. I don't know. I think that maybe you should ask me some questions.
I think your comments about the different, well, one of the things that was different compared to the restaurant today is that there was a menu each night, and it was I think quite a challenge for the chef to come up with a different meal every night of the season. Well, that's one difference, that you didn't have many entrees to choose from. Am I right? On any given night, there were.
They always had at least 4 main courses.
To choose from. Sorry. Oh, okay. We'll let the plane go by.
Yeah, because the plane's going to be in this.
Alrighty. Now we did discuss sometime, but I haven't given due credit to Mr. Grandy, George Grandy, and his wife Kay, who, after Mr. Buffum Sr., the original Mr. Frederick C. Buffum, owner and builder of the old inn, he died, and the business of the inn was taken over by a former clerk whom he had hired, and it was George Grandy, and he worked for 42 years for the Buffum family. And it was after his retirement that Bob and I took over. Bob as manager and me as just the helper. like Mrs. Grandy was. And the meals and all continued to be quite the same. They were always large dinners with appetizer, soup, salad, 3 or 4 or 5 courses to choose from, and desserts, and coffee and decaffeinated coffee. So those were the more or less delicious fare, which was offered 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it was one of the reasons people came to the inn. So we felt a big onus to be sure when we took over that we carried on that same tradition, which I think we did. Let's see, I don't know, now what else was it that you wished me to rehearse?
Well, let me just change subjects and ask you to speak to them. How much interaction was there between the community and the inn? I've been told stories by the people who remember the old inn that the youngsters were down by the inn or in the inn all the time. What is your memory here about how much community interaction there was with the inn guests?
Well, the inn always had families of some kind, although when I first saw it, I thought it was filled with people with white hair. But it really wasn't. There were young families there, and many of these young families bought or built into the community. So the inn was in the early 20s, 30s, 40s, and early 50s a very vital part of the community of Weekapaug. They had dances, they had bingo, they had various different tennis, the original tennis courts. For a while were here at the inn, and they were bad bocce bowling, as I explained. The men played in the morning, so it was quite the center. And in our day, they started the Weekapaug Foundation for conservation, and we would have the party to raise money here on the lawn of the inn. So there's always been a tradition between the inn and the community, which I think has been beneficial for both sides. I don't think some people would be here if it hadn't been for the inn. They came here and loved the inn and wanted to buy and build. So I think the community and the inn have grown up together.
Complete change of subject. Where were you in 1954 for Carol? Tell us about it. You were presumably here.
We were not. It was the first year that Buffy was born, and Bob and I had taken a year-round job because when we had originally planned to go to California, and Bob had a job as an assistant manager at the Desert Inn, and when we wrote them and told them that there was a possibility that we would be having a child in April, they wrote back and said they didn't want us, which I was horrified at the moment, but I understand now. And so Bob got a job that winter working for the Torrington Manufacturing Company in Torrington, Massachusetts, and we lived in a house in Goshen, which was close by. So we lived there took the job for the winter, and then it went into the summer. So we were not here, but when we heard about the hurricane, we came right down and saw all the destruction, but we were not here for the event.
What was the best thing about the inn as you remember it then, and what was the worst thing?
Well, the best thing, of course, was seeing everybody come back. And Buff had so many friends whose families came back, and she made lifelong friends of the children who were here. And then, of course, she had lifelong friends with the community. I mean, it was a wonderful existence between, and Buff was more or less the bridge for many of the children who got to know the community. We had the tennis, and everybody went to the beach, of course. So I think that was one of the highlights, was how people interacted. And what did you say? Something awful?
Also, what you liked the least?
Oh, nothing in those days, I don't think, except, of course, Mr. Grandy, he was wonderful, and he was managing the inn, and Bob, and so was his wife, Hay. And Bob and I, of course, are both champing to get running the inn ourselves. So it was kind of a little bit difficult at that time. But we had a lot of fun, and Chet Buffum worked with Bob. They were both clerks one summer, and they had a good time working together.
Time out for a minute.
Yes.
Let that.
Go.
Buff is in the background over here, and she's coaching me a little bit. So she wants me to mention the fact that as a family, not only Bob and myself were in the inn, but they were in the inn. Buff, Rob, and Jim. They all grew up in their summer vacations were spent at the inn, and they were either next door or they were up on the bridge, and so they had many adventures to tell about guests and about fun times that they had with the guests that and their families.
What's the bridge?
And the bridge, of course, is the top deck of that bunch of rooms. They were all single rooms or double rooms with the bath down the hall, not a bath attached to the room, which all the other Weekapaug Inn guests had. They had bathrooms included in the inn room situation. But on the bridge, it was for the young people or for some of the very elderly guests who couldn't afford it down below. They would go up on the bridge. We had a few wonderful stories about those ladies, but I will wait on that one. And then
The parade and the bocce bowl.
we had, oh yes, we always had fun at the inn. I mean, the inn had an air of sort of informal fun. They had tennis tournaments, they had tennis, they had bocce, they had bocce bowling, and when they did that, they ended up the season with taking on the staff, and they had that, the staff would dress up. We had all sorts of sort of fun, unusual things that we did during the season for the guests and for ourselves, I would say. So there was good interaction there. And one of the, not to jump ahead, but of course I am, Lang asked me, or reminded me about the doors between, we had two sets, every room had two doors, two entrance doors from the hall. One was a louvered door, and the other was a regular wooden door. But the doors at the inn were left open. You couldn't see in, but the air flew from the southwest breeze, entered the windows and floated across the halls and into the other rooms. So it was the ventilation. We didn't have any air conditioning in those days, but you really didn't need it. So at night, we had a person who walks up, the night watchman. He walked back and forth and up and down, and as he walked back, he would hear the various different snores and noises, night noises that were coming from all the rooms. I wish that we had taken some kind of a hearing on that one, but we never did. But it was amusing, and people would sometimes, I think, have to close their doors, but most of the time the doors were open at night. Okay, what about any other questions?
I think you've done a great job telling us things that aren't in our questions, and I think we might be done. Buff, is there something you think your mom should have talked about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
I wanted to know, even if you didn't know the original innkeeper, or number two, maybe you knew number two.
Yes, you knew
yes.
that my mother
Knew Mr. Grandy.
Well, obviously, you may have heard stories. And if there is one wonderful story that stood out about the original innkeeper, that I thought that would be fun. Like
Frederick.
Well, in Bob's book,
Frederick C., yeah.
The Phoebe and Frederick.
he has the one about
Yeah.
catching the flies. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a
story.
good one. That's in the book.
Yeah.
I just thought that would be nice because you would be the generation that remembered. Jim wouldn't because he didn't Well, maybe he would remember stories.
Oh, he'd remember his grandfather running it.
Yes,
I mean,
but not his great-grandfather.
Not his great-grandfather.
And you didn't know the great-grandfather, but you heard stories from the grandfather.
But see, the
Jim's grandfather
Yeah.
and
Great grandfather passed away in
and Bob's
1931, didn't he?
Yes, the original.
Oh.
died in
Granddad,
1951.
my grandfather and granddad, he hired Mr. Grandy to run it.
Yes.
So Mr. Grandy was running it for 42 years. While, when we used to have dinner with granddad and all that in the dining room.
Yeah. I mean,
But-
Bob's father owned it, but he never
He
ran
never,
it.
he didn't
Are you
run it.
trying to get her?
Okay, so it's I guess
right.
Frederick C. Buffum the first.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's the
Kathy, that's
first.
Kathy, move.
There's
Um,
Oh, you're walking in the. Okay.
That's all right.
Kathy, there's 4 of them now.
this
We'll
is called
edit that out.
editing one.
Okay.
There's
Let me
4
just try and
Four Frederick.
find the sun again.
Well, I'm. Oh boy, now.
Okay, so this topic that Kathy's introduced, do you want to speak to it?
Frederick C., the first innkeeper.
Yeah.
If a story comes across your mind that would be fun, apparently he was.
Well, you'd have to, see, I don't really remember.
I did see it a minute ago. You did flash by her.
Dad,
There you've got her.
There it is.
Uh-huh.
want me to hold that?
And I think it was Bob who said that funny thing about the bad guest that wasn't invited back.
What did he do? I
Classic.
don't remember that.
Oh, it was a classic. I don't know how he said it.
Well, no, the story that I remember, we are all still taping here, by the way, but that's fine. The story that I think I remember is that some guests arrived and were put off by the fact
yes.
that there wasn't air conditioning and so on, and
Yeah.
Bob said, well, look, you've driven out here, it's late in the day, why don't you spend the night?
I'll give it to you free.
And did he say it was free? And, you can leave. And the next morning, and so the guests decided they could hack it anyway.
And they loved it.
I don't remember that at all.
You didn't give it to him for free?
No, I think that's
Was
correct.
it
He did
free?
not, but he basically let him out of the rest of his reservation. But they had such a nice time, they decided
Right.
to stay.
I don't remember that at all.
Okay.
Well, what about the fly?
I remember the one where the man said, I don't see how anybody stays here. The beds are hard. This is a story, a quote from Bob's book about, and it goes back to his grandfather who started the original inn and was out on the beach. So they had a very nice clientele, and this gentleman had just come in as a new guest. He went down to the front desk and asked to see the owner. He was told, Mr. Buffum is out on the front porch watching the waves. The guest went out, introduced himself, and said, Mr. Buffum, there is something I don't understand. Your inn seems to be full, and yet its furnishings are rather poor. The bedsteads are white painted iron. The mattresses are rather hard, judging by the one I slept on last night. There is no running water in my room, just a big white pitcher in a bowl. The bath is at the end of the hall, and there's not much decoration anywhere. I was told that people come here year after year. I don't understand it. After some reflection, Mr. Buffum said, I don't understand it either. And that was the association between him and the unnamed guest who came back many summers.
What was the other story?
Didn't we get the one about the slats in the door?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did that one.
Yeah.
The story that I related about the guest who came and didn't think the hotel was up to standard, but it was Bob or Fred who said, "Well, why don't you spend the night
Well, that was Dad.
and I'll let you out of I'll refund the rest of your reservation or whatever."
That's funny,
And-
I don't even remember that.
Well,
But Lane, how about the flies?
Well-
She does remember the flies. I don't
so the
even
story
know.
of the flies.
yeah, that's
Well,
that's
what about-
grandfather also,
What
great
about
grand.
Mr. Gibbs? And he arrived with all his cars, and they had to build the garage.
Yeah.
for his cars. Isn't that?
Is that how come?
Yeah.
There,
That's why we had
there
so
is a
many-
big, but there is a big garage. Was that at the old inn?
Yeah, there was one too for the old inn, but
Built for
over
him
here
or
they
for
hadn't. They didn't build it. They built that garage. Well, everybody wanted a garage for a car.
Right, but
I
Mr.
mean,
Gibbs
they
had
didn't-
a fancy car.
Yeah.
Is he the one who had the Ferrari?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
had
I
not
remember that.
the Ferrari. The Ferrari's plural.
Oh,
he
is
had
that
two
right?
or three.
Yeah, yeah. I remember hearing him up on Route 1.
But you have to be
From
careful, don't you, about a person.
Oh, well, then we don't mention their name.
They can't mention their
Okay.
names.
Yeah.
Well, you could say a former distinguished guest brought his Ferraris.
Yeah.
And we needed to build the garage. Grandfather built the garage, or so he could store his cars for the summer.
Well, not the original
There's
Mr.
a
Buffum.
there's
He
a
had
theme here
died.
that I think is fun.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that you guys were amazing to me was that when ladies would come for long periods of time, you would move their furniture into their room, so that you always set the room up for them just right.
Right.
And
Well,
then the extreme example was the gentleman who had Ferraris, and you had to build a garage for him.
Well, I don't know if that's totally.
Is that apocryphal or?
well, it could be a little apocryphal. But
How about Mrs. Snowden, who came unannounced and insisted that she had reservations with her 5 kids or something?
That was at the old inn,
That was
right?
at the old inn.
That's in
Yeah.
the book.
Snowdy?
yeah.
Snooty.
No, that was Mrs. Snowden.
Okay, I think we're
But
we're
Mom,
done.
you
We're
met
trying
Mrs.
too hard now.
Snowden.
Yeah.
Didn't you meet Mrs. Snowden here? That
Yeah, I had that written down when I first met Mrs. Snowden.
Director.
In room 10. I was told that I should, she asked to see me. And I had not met her. But as Bob's potential wife, or I guess it was,
You were married.
I think I'm not sure that we were married. Were we? Were
Yeah.
we married? Yeah, as his wife, I had to go down and meet him because Bob was the potential
New
runner of
innkeeper.
the inn. And so she wanted to meet me as such. That was, but that's not I don't think that's a very interesting.
She did come from the old inn, though, didn't she?
Oh, yeah, she came from the old inn and moved into the new inn, yeah. I know. Now, let's see what I've got, these others.
Well, tell the story without talking about Mr. Gibb by name. Tell the story about the man who brought his Ferraris and whether or not you had to build. And there's a little bit of the inn's lore that you guys built him a couple of garages for them. Is that fairly
I
said?
don't really remember that,
Oh,
but
all right,
I
then
do.
let's not make
I mean,
it up.
I could make it up because
No,
it's
no, no.
Well,
possible.
you could say, but
I think that
But you-
I think they built garages. The old inn had garages in it underneath. I think that the garages were built with the inn. But Mr. Gibbs came and he took all of them practically
There you
for his various different Ferraris. That
that would
was
be good.
that was
That's good.
what it was.
That's good.
I
And-
remember that garage. It was a 15-bay garage. 'cause
Yeah,
I
and he
tore
had
it
at
down.
least half of them.
And yeah, and so he had that many cars.
Yeah, he had at
He's
least.
worse than me.
Well, you could tell that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could tell that.
Well, then, let's see.
You could say under
He
the
and
thing,
his
interesting
he-
guest at the end.
Yeah,
Well,
they were. A lot of them were open, because is a
Yeah.
Ferrari open?
Sometimes they're open, sometimes they're
He
cool.
had
Most
to
of
cover it
them-
with the canvas.
Yes, but yeah, he covered them over when they were in the garage with the can so that they wouldn't get dusty. But I can remember him going, and he would take his wife, and she would put a kerchief on her head and was underneath, and they would go off and they would go into the netherworlds behind up in Charlestown or where, and go along at huge.
Rates of speed.
Yes.
And you could hear them up there?
Well, no, you couldn't quite, but you could hear them coming back.
But you could sort of say how the guests
That
would come
was-
back every year and they'd want their same room
Yeah.
and they'd have the same. You'd
Yeah.
always like custom
Yeah.
make
That's good.
so that
Yeah.
every year they came back and things were the same.
Yeah.
And
The
they
furniture would be brought up from the Mrs. What's her name?
Well,
What's
they
that
came
name?
down from the
Mrs.
attic.
Barrett.
All the furniture was stored after the guests left because they would come for the season, so they wanted to have certain items. But they bought them and put them in the room. So then those had to be tagged and go to the attic and
That's a
stay.
good story. That's a good
But
story.
that was Mrs. Harrod's room, wasn't it? Didn't she have?
No, Mrs. Harrod. Well, Mrs. Harrod had things in them, but it was
It was Hamill,
mostly
too.
Hamill.
they are Mrs. Hamill, that's right, you're right. And, God, what are some of those other names? Oh,
Mrs. Purcell.
Purcell, oh,
She
God.
had to have a television in there.
Yeah, she had a TV.
And Mrs. Hamill had the same rooms on the second floor, and she'd take two. And Jim told me this because he had to get her furniture up. She was arriving, and he had to go find her furniture and get it all set up before she got here. She didn't have exactly she wasn't exactly popular. She was...
No, she was quite severe.
Yes.
And, everything had to be quite
And then
right.
I
was,
can't use this part of the tape.
Then
No.
there was Mrs. McCullough that had the ground floor room.
Oh, well, no, she had from,
Oh, that's right. She was up on the
20,
You done?
No,
was
it's
it?
stopped.
18, I
Oh.
think.
I
No,
gotta keep an eye on
18
it.
was the end.
she was up on the desk floor, the lobby.
Yeah. And she drank, but you can't have put
Don't
that
put
in
that
there.
on there.
Maybe that's why she was severe.
No,
Okay,
no,
I think
she was always in.
so. The good news is you're here for another several weeks.
Yeah.
So if a lot of ideas of what you wish you'd said come to you,
Look,
we can do this again, and we won't have Geri's expertise, but
Well, I might be able to drive up depending on the day.
okay. I think we should conclude.
we'll only pick good days.
Okay, we're done. It's a wrap.
Is Terry Goodwin, and I've been coming here ever since I'm told I was conceived here. So I'm living outside of Toronto, Ontario now. I was one of 8 to 10,000 Americans that joined Canadian forces before the States was in the war. Now, as I remember the inn as a kid, why, I can remember it on the beach, and I can remember the path of this cement sidewalk that led to it. And particularly, I remember the stories that were told by my grandmother Hapgood. And after the 1938 hurricane, they went over to see the inn at how it had come through. The wind was still very strong at the time, but the waves had overlapped and filled the ponds back here, so that they had cut a new breachway alongside of the old inn. And the wind was so strong that as my grandmother and one of her daughters and her son were standing about 100 feet west of it, the water in the new breachway had cut underneath, and the whole west wing went down, and they couldn't hear it because the wind was so strong. And they walked back to the cottage where it is now. Now, I was one of 8 to 10,000 Americans that joined the Canadian Air Force and served as a bomber pilot in England with the Royal Air Force there, mostly at night. On one holiday, I was on the west coast of England, above Liverpool, and we were invited to talk to a family that had been in the States for 20 odd years, managing a British textile company. And
There's too much airplane noise right now. We gotta wait for that jet. And we get that one plane's gone. But
That truck backing up.
yeah, you know, we're constantly beset with outside noise. So just go ahead, back up a paragraph, and I haven't touched the camera, but to turn it off, so you can pick up right where you were. But let this guy get out of earshot. This is, you look really terrific, and
You do.
it's going to be a neat composition. I think this tape is going to be a pleasure to watch. That's probably the Boston to Washington shuttle. Okay, I guess we're quiet. No, we're not. What is this?
It's a jet.
Oh, another jet. Where are the jets going from? This guy maybe is. Oh no, he isn't. You know what that is? That's one of those ospreys.
Planes are in the front.
You know what the Osprey is? It's the Marine Corps aircraft that has helicopter blades, and it vertically lifts and then flips their engines forward, and then you can go through. I've never seen one before. I've seen the expensive aircraft.
And they're replacing it.
Are they?
Yeah, they need a newer one because they're having like 6 or 7 companies all present their designs to them because they need something even better than that.
Yeah, because it flies much faster than a helicopter, but it can land. Oops, now I did just bump the truck.
one of the chaps that designed the helicopter hub for Boeing
Uh-huh.
visited me, and he was married to my first cousin
Oh.
outside of Philadelphia. So
Okay, so you were just talking about your being on leave up near Liverpool, and so back up about a paragraph. Start that story a little.
I was
Okay, wait, hang on. You're not live yet. Sorry about all the noise. It's obviously out of my control. Okay, now you're live. Go ahead. Back up to the RAF.
Yes, I was on leave from RAF as a bomber pilot, and I was visiting friends and north of Liverpool on the coast there, and we went to see neighbors who had lived in the States for 20 years. And the daughter was 2 years older than I, and so wasn't very interested in even having me around the place. And so the second day we went over there, why, she mentioned that the wreck offshore was very like the wreck at Weekapaug. And my ears pricked up right away as soon as she said, and what about Weekapaug? Well, we went there every summer. And where did you stay? At the inn, of course. You know, speaking to this ignorant pilot who was 2 years younger than she. And so then we went and investigated that a little bit longer, and I explained that I had been at Weekapaug a long time And thank you very much.
So, you told me you're 94, and given that you were conceived 9 months earlier, I guess I can do the math and say that you must have been born about 1920 or 21.
20.
Okay, and although you don't remember, what's your earliest recollection of Weekapaug and specifically the inn?
I can remember walking across the pathway, the cement sidewalk that went from around the long point and
Around Spray Rock, yes.
Into there, and at very high tide and with a little bit of storm help, the water would flow over that from the sea. So it's very easy to understand how with a storm, the hurricane, it would build up and fill up the pond very deep so that it would naturally cut a breachway back out to the sea. And grandmother and Aunt Dottie and Uncle Miles couldn't hear anything when that west wing collapsed.
That would have been because after a hurricane passes, the way the wind is rotating, it comes out of the west ferociously. When the hurricane is coming at you, the wind is out of the east, but as it moves past you, the big cyclonic or anticyclonic flow of air makes it come out of the west. So what you were experiencing was a very strong wind behind you, which caused them not to hear
Yes.
the noise because it was so strong. So your earliest recollections were walking along the sidewalk on the ocean front, that around Spray Rock.
Yes. Yes.
How old do you think you were?
Well, at that time I was probably about 3 years old.
Oh wow!
So
What comes to mind about how things were different then versus now? When you reflect back on that, do you think it was a better time, a quieter time, a more fun time?
that would be an interesting comment because you had fun on the beaches, you had fun sailing here on the pond, and it was community. You knew everybody, and
When you say you knew everybody, you knew the people in the Weekapaug community probably well. Did
Yeah.
you also get to know even the inn guests who would come back year after year as well?
I didn't know so many of those people.
Okay. Did you ever go into the inn to eat? Did you ever sleep at the inn?
I never slept at the inn.
Okay. Did your family take you over there for dinner sometimes?
I don't think I was there for dinner
Uh-huh.
that often.
So you stayed until you joined the RAF. Or at least you were coming every summer. Did you come?
Mostly summers.
My control. Okay, now you're live. Go ahead. Back up to the RAF.
Yes, I was on leave from RAF as a bomber pilot, and I was visiting friends north of Liverpool on the coast there, and we went to see neighbors who had lived in the States for 20 years. And the daughter was 2 years older than I, and so wasn't very interested in even having me around the place. And so the second day we went over there, she mentioned that the wreck offshore was very like the wreck at Weekapaug. And my ears pricked up right away as soon as she said, and what about Weekapaug? Well, we went there every summer. And where did you stay? At the inn, of course. You know, speaking to this ignorant pilot who was 2 years younger than she. And so then we went and investigated that a little bit longer, and I explained that I had been at Weekapaug a long time, and thank you very much.
So, you told me you're 94, and given that you were conceived 9 months earlier, I guess I can do the math and say that you must have been born about 1920 or 21.
20.
Okay, and although you don't remember, what's your earliest recollection of Weekapaug and specifically the inn?
I can remember walking across the pathway, the cement sidewalk that went from around the long point.
Around Spray Rock, yes.
There, and at very high tide, and with a little bit of storm help, the water would flow over that from the sea. So it's very easy to understand how with a storm, the hurricane, it would build up and fill up the pond very deep, so that it would naturally cut a breachway back out to the sea. And grandmother and Aunt Dottie and Uncle Miles couldn't hear anything when that west wing collapsed.
That would have been because after a hurricane passes, the way the wind is rotating, it comes out of the west ferociously. When the hurricane is coming at you, the wind is out of the east, but as it moves past you, it's the big cyclonic or anticyclonic flow of air makes it come out of the west. So what you were experiencing was a very strong wind behind you, which caused them not to hear the noise because it was so strong. So your earliest recollections were walking along the sidewalk on the ocean front, that around Spray Rock.
Yes.
How old do you think you were?
Well, at that time I was probably about 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
So
what comes to mind about how things were different then versus now? When you reflect back on that, do you think it was a better time, a quieter time, a more fun time?
that would be an interesting comment, because you had fun on the beaches, you had fun sailing here on the pond, and it was community. you knew everybody, and
When you say you knew everybody, you knew the people in the Weekapaug community probably well. Did you also get to know even the inn guests who would come back year after year as well?
I didn't know so many of those people.
Okay. Okay. Did you ever go into the inn to eat? Did you ever sleep at the inn?
I never slept at the inn.
Okay. Did your family take you over there for dinner sometimes?
I don't think I was there for dinner.
Uh-huh. So you stayed until you joined the RAF, or at least you were coming every summer. Did you come?
Most of these summers.
So you mentioned pond and beach. I've seen old movies of people playing baseball and playing tennis and so on. Was that part of your summertime as well?
I don't remember specifically playing the ball games.
I see. Were you here or already in the RAF? No, you wouldn't have been in the RAF yet. In 1938, when the hurricane.
Oh no,
You weren't.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
Were you around for Hurricane Carol in '54?
Yes, I was here
You were.
in '54.
Tell us about that.
Well, we were actually staying over in a cottage back there,
In Habersham?
and we built a brand new beach box for the Fenway Beach, and we'd taken that apart as part of a construction, and we just set it up, and the storm came along and mauled it pretty badly, but somebody set it back 50 feet, and it was knocked over the first set of dunes and into the pond there. So as the waves hit it, why, it was had a certain amount of cushion to it, and it survived. And only Mendes cut off last year when we decided that the nuts and bolts hadn't worked on it properly. So it's in the firewood.
But you used it for 60 years almost after the hurricane. Because it's
After
2014.
54.
Yeah? Wow.
Yes.
The beach box?
Yeah. And it went through the hurricane. How about that?
Watching that one.
One tough beach box.
Making a coffee cup.
Yeah. What was it like in Weekapaug then versus now? What comes to mind?
You have a lot of natural progression of traffic. And of course, we run into that when we run into gridlock in our various cities. So,
Well, we don't have gridlock necessarily in Weekapaug, but maybe we do out by Spray Rock. But I take your point more broadly. Have you other things that you had wanted to tell us about in terms of the early inn or early Weekapaug?
well, I tell the story of being on leave in England and eventually finding somebody else who had spent a good portion of their life in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and had visited Weekapaug Inn as a regular thing.
Yeah. That was the lady you met outside of
Yes.
Liverpool, right?
Yes.
Right.
We're done.
Do you know what her name was?
Barbara Crook. And I've checked the list here in the inn.
Hold your phone.
A lot of plane traffic.
It's a beautiful afternoon. I guess everybody's going somewhere.
I'm very interested in the fact that they use planes to and from Black Island. The Islander, as they call there, they're made in England and was built to serve the Isle of Wight, W-I-G-H-T,
Right.
and on the south coast. And it was very interesting because they used American engines on international financing, and then that's what they use right
Oh, really?
here. And there are a flock of those down in the Bahamas that operate from Florida and the Bahamas.
I think are we done?
Well, do you have any other good memories about the inn?
I think
Did you meet
I've covered.
Covered everything. All
Okay,
right.
good. Thank you, Terry.
Excellent.
Thank
What, you were flying B-24s? No.
I flew Lancasters,
Oh, those were huge, weren't they?
and these were 7, a pilot and 6 other crew members, and we lost about 5% per trip. So at the 10 trips, you lost half your chances, and the tour was 30 trips, and 1 out of 3 actually made it.
Oh, wow.
But the Americans, the tour was 25 trips, but they had 11 on most of the aircraft, and the casualty rate on those things were horrible.
Those were B-17s.
B-17s,
Yeah, Super
B-24s, Liberators.
Yeah.
I had to instruct on Liberators when they got back out in Vancouver, training people for the Korean
Hummingbird.
You've got
Hummingbirds, yeah.
hummingbirds.
Yeah. You bet. Okay. Thank you.
Fine.
Film that.
Great. I'll take you home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wrote this little song because I don't think people know that Bob Buffum was born right here in the cottage in Weekapaug. And I wrote this. By the kitchen table in the summer homestead, old Doc Johnson standing by the bed. The first citizen born in this Weekapaug town turned out to be a fella of great renown. So Bob and I are inseparable and remain so through all the many years. Now in thinking about Weekapaug, when we were kids, there was complete freedom. We had all the freedom you could ever want to have because we had to plan our own things that we were going to do. There was no one that taught us how to sail. There was no one that taught us how to play tennis. We were given a .295 Spalding racket. We grabbed it, and that was the grip we used for a lifetime. There were 4 places that we spent our time. First place was the Weekapaug Yacht Club. And we were there every morning with the boats, the sneak boxes, and we would go out and we would practice starts. We knew where the best wind was, we knew every rock, we knew every bit of the pond, and that was our morning activity, the whole gang of us, all at the yacht club. Nobody told us to be there, we just arrived. Second place that we went to was, of course, the beach. And we always seemed to arrive about 11 o'clock at the same time, formed a great circle. And there was Jimmy Slimmin, Rod Steve, Bob Buffum, Mimi Camp, Ann Demarest, Pootie Houston, and probably met Flossie Hatch and so many others, I'm sure. And that's where we spent the rest of the morning, and then, of course, we always went home because we were hungry and went to lunch. Our afternoons were often spent here, especially Bob and I, because of the tennis courts. We played a lot of tennis here, but we did a lot here at the inn. The inn was a very special place. Our dances were here on Saturday night, and when I tell my children about those dances and what great fun they were, I think they can't believe it was all that much fun. We came with our parents. They sat around in the sea room or out on the porch, and we danced. Because we were young teenagers, so we weren't driving at that point. And I can see now Mr. and Mrs. Grandy. They would swish in, and we would let everyone left the floor because they knew how to dance, and they came in doing the waltz, and it was just so nice to see them. But that was Saturday night here at the inn. We were also here, I think, for the final yacht club event when we were initiated into the Davy Jones locker by Dr. Ogilvy, who was our Commodore. And I do want to tell this one story about Dr. Ogilvy because maybe no one else will remember. But it was during the war, probably 1941, and he was president of Trinity College, and they were going round the clock. So he wasn't here much, and he generally, when he was here, ran our races. And when he ran the races, it was just special. He'd fire off the gun on Judge's Rock, and off we'd go. But he came that morning, and we all sat around on the dock, and he sat with us and told us stories. And he said then that he was going to run the race, and he was going home for a swim and lunch, and he would be back. And we never saw him again. That was the day that he drowned over in the dunes. The story is that he rescued his maid who was in trouble in the sea, and it was just such a terrible blow. We will just never forget that morning with him, and he was gone in the afternoon. The other tennis.
Yes.
We played tennis here, Bob and I, and we were here. We knew the inn guests pretty well. Since we were only given one tennis can for the summer, Bob and I would come around here and wait for Mr. Howard to come out and hope he would play with us, because he'd come out with his racket and powder would come out of the case, we'd look at this powder, and then he'd always open a new can of balls, and then he'd give us the balls when we finished playing with him, and we needed those balls badly. So it was the second can we had. But we had our tournaments over here, and I don't know whether you know about our great tennis tournaments over here at the inn. And that's how we got to know so many people. But all the males put their name in one hat, and the females put their names in the other hat, and then we drew names. And you never knew who you were going to get. And I always got somebody like Mr. Poley, and he was staying at the inn, and he was a teacher at Germantown Friends School in Philadelphia, of course. And we never would have ever called him by their first name. He was Mr. Poley. You played tennis with Mr. Poley. And whoever you got, that was who played the whole tournament with. And of course, if you got Hunt Welch, you probably won. he could cover the whole court for you, whatever. But he was the best. He was the best tennis player down here amongst us kids, young people. So that was a great way of getting to know the people here at the inn, which was special for us. And a lot of those people came a long time, came back year after year, and they stayed a fair amount of time, so we really could get to know them. And then when we got to the drinking age, we would come over here, and of course we had to drink in their rooms because there was no drinking at the inn, and we'd have a little cocktail and so forth. But here at the inn with the inn guests. So we spent a lot of time here at the inn and loved being here. And of course I got all the good food because I sat with the Buffums. The fourth place that was important was the chapel. And Dr. Ogilvie was not only Commodore, but he was president of the chapel. And we had no Sunday school, we just all went. And I think we learned theology in a sense. We certainly knew our Bible stories because Dr. Ogilvie acted them out, and we were the actors, we kids. And, we all know the story about Sandy and the whale, Jonah and the whale. And then he'd have us come in 2 by 2, we'd come into the ark, and he'd have us all as animals coming in. He was just a great entertainer, and when we went to church and he was preaching, it was just great fun to be there. And I think the chapel from then on has always been a fun place in a sense to be, and we just always go. And if you look at the congregation, you'll see all the old folk that grew up there, they're still going. And of course now there's not many of us left. But I think it was the freedom here that as kids, and nobody ever worried about what we did. I don't know why our parents didn't worry. But when Bob and I were very little in the old inn, Bob had a little sailing dinghy, and we would go back and forth in the little pond. I don't think we had life preservers on. And Skipper Chase was supposed to be watching, but I never saw Skipper Chase ever get out of his chair. Just sat there. He was in control of all the boats. They had a dock out of the old inn. And that's for as kids. And then as Bob and I always spent every afternoon on the rocks. We knew every rock. We named them all. We knew where all the good crabs were. And nobody ever worried.
You're on. Thank you.
For evening entertainment, when we were small, we were always at the Steve's house playing Capture the Flag. That was the big thing that we did. Got a little older, and then we always had at least once a week a sailing picnic down the pond. And I can remember so well coming home from that picnic. We'd come home probably around 9 o'clock. And everybody stopped talking the minute we passed St. John's Point, because we knew that if we made any noise and woke anybody up at the Weekapaug Inn, we would be in trouble with Mr. Grandy. And that wasn't worth it. So it was just amazing. Automatically, everybody stopped talking, and we would come on in. But let me just read you this, and then I'm pretty much through. I wrote this for Rod Steve. He had a big family had a big party. 70 years they had been here, and they had a big party celebrating 70 years because they came the year of the hurricane. 1938 was when the Steves first came. And I wrote this. And now in our vintage years we see how lucky we were to be in that glorious age of the last century, when life seemed so simple and we could all run free. But there was only one place where we had to be. On Sunday morning at the chapel, that was the place. While Dr. Ogilvie shed on his grace as we walked in 2 by 2 to the ark, or so saw Sandy spouting water from the belly of the whale. And even today we know it's the place to go. There are people who we all hold dear in our memory, getting our Weekapaug bracelets from Mr. Batty, and becoming a member of Davy Jones' locker by Dr. Ogilvy. Bend over, no need to fear, as he jabbed that safety pin in some boy's rear. The dancers at the inn watching the waltz danced so gracefully by Mr. and Mrs. Grandy, with all our mothers watching us so carefully. Our tennis tournaments at the inn, if you drew Hunt Welch, you'd probably win, but like me, you could draw an old school teacher like Mr. Poley, all in such good fun. But Mrs. Steve was the grand lady of Weekapaug. Her name stands out. She cared about us and was always about keeping an eye on all that we did. She was a special friend to every kid. I can close my eyes, and to this day, I can see her at a good clip heading yacht club way. That's where her boys hung out. So she was there. Dear Mrs. Steve, she was our summer counselor, friend to all. We were privileged and blessed to call her our friend. That's just a little bit about what I wrote, but that was the days of what we did here in Weekapaug. A great place to live, quite different today. That's it.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is because we didn't have to be anywhere. We had no lessons, so we were on our own all day long.
Okay.
Nobody taught us a thing.
Let's make that point, okay?
Yeah.
Without us prompting. It's a great point, because today's kids are ever so scheduled. They have a tennis lesson,
right.
a sailing lesson, and they have to be on the beach to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Can you make that point just,
Yes.
and we'll get it on film?
Yes, we had nothing, and that was what was so great about our days. We just automatically be where we should be, at the yacht club in the morning, then the beach, then Bob and I would be up here at the tennis courts hanging around, or down in the rocks climbing around. But we had no lessons, nothing. Nobody taught us a thing. We were totally on our own, and it was just a wonderful experience because we didn't have to be anywhere at a certain time except 10 o'clock on Sunday morning was the only requirement.
That's great. That's the kind of poignant point that I hope to capture here. Now, you talked about the inn, and because you were born in 26, and this was built when you were 13, all of your sort of social life and adolescence was here.
Yeah.
What can you say about the old inn?
I wasn't over there too much at the old inn. Just when Bob and I would be sailing in that little dinghy, and we'd be over there. And I just remember all those, I figured they were all old folk rocking in their rocking chairs as we'd swim there.
You swam in the ocean, right?
Yeah. We always swam in the ocean. Of course, I remember the days that we did things that were not quite right when they closed the beach here. We would then go over to the Ogilvy's house because they were on the dunes. There was no lifeguard there. And we would swim in the surf. It wasn't a good idea. I remember the day that Bob Buffin pulled Pootie and me out. But I don't remember so much about the old inn.
Did you ever play tennis over there? They had a court.
No, I never did.
You didn't.
No, always played here.
Did you take meals there? You mentioned that you and Bob were exactly contemporaries.
No, because as I recall in those days, we were mostly at the cottage with the Buffin family, and I don't remember going down there. But here, I remember eating a lot here, many times, but not there.
So in 1930, Frederick Sr. passes away. 1930, Phoebe passed away, right? She predeceased him by maybe a year.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that had some effect on the where you were and how engaged
No, it really
you were
didn't.
with the inn.
Really didn't.
So
I mean, of course.
By the late 30s, then, Mr. Brandy was operating it.
He was operating.
And young Frederick was the proprietor.
Yeah, but Mr. Brandy was the manager. And You know, the Buffums, well, you know, the Buffums had 3 boys, and the lost young Freddie.
Didn't know that.
At the Buffums and the Grotons had children.
Sorry.
It went off?
We often wondered whether our mothers planned it or not, but they had their 3 children exactly at the same time and the same year. Freddie Buffum was my brother Bill's age. He was a little older, 3 years older than Bob and I. Bob and I were the same age, born in the summer, and Chet and my brother Cal, born the same year, summer. So the 3, and of course I was the only girl, and my Aunt Margaret Buffum always wanted a girl, so I was in. That's why I spent so much time with the Buffum family. And Freddie died, I think, probably around age 8 or 9. Well, I think something may have happened when he was born. Well, no, but my brother Cal always felt he was a little frail. But he was just a wonderful, wonderful kid. And I think that's, well, I probably shouldn't say this, that's why Bob was born here in the cottage. He didn't go to the hospital. But there were 3 boys there, and that's why I was so fortunate being a girl. Because we lived in Westerly, you see, we didn't live down here. But I spent most of my time with the Buffum family.
Your comment about people. Start again.
When we were here, there were far less people. No cars. We weren't worried about people hitting us or anything. We rode our bikes everywhere.
The roads paved?
Yeah, they were. But it was simple living down here. The houses were simple. You just, it seemed to me that everybody, they just swept their houses out, closed the door, and went home for the winter. There was nothing very fancy here. Watch Hill was fancy, we thought. But we always felt we did better than the Watch Hill kids because we worked harder at it. And we generally could beat them in racing. And of course another thing we had these big baseball games every Sunday over where the Browns lived, the Whitakers. That was always a big deal thing. But you know, we were always all together. And we never had any fights between any of us, so we all got along. It was amazing we all got along so well. We all liked each other. And we were all nice to each other. So it was just a nice place to be.
I've noticed in some of the old Albie Spicer movies how well dressed everybody was. There was no grunge. I mean, even when they were sailing, you had on shoes and collared shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get into the Weekapaug Inn for dinner more casually dressed than the kids when they were out in their boats. Is that true? I mean,
yeah, but I mean, Mrs. Steve, she always wore a dress. You'd see her zipping down the street there to get to the yacht club. She was always well dressed. I don't think any of our parents wore slacks or pants. and we as kids were dressed. I mean, if we went to if we were going somewhere, we were dressed.
To what extent was Weekapaug some splendid isolation and unrepresentative from the Great Depression? Now, you were really young at the outset of that. You were 3 if you were born in 26. So, but did you sense the Great Depression? By 38, when the hurricane came, the Depression was sort of. It was still pretty severe.
I don't think so. We were living in New Bedford, and I certainly remember the Depression there. My first recollection was the day the banks closed. I remember that day, but we were in New Bedford, not here. So I don't think so. I mean, we had to ride our bikes. You know, there weren't weren't people driving around in fancy cars, because there weren't fancy cars, but you know, it was always interesting to me. You would never have known if a person had money down here. They never showed it, and there were people that had money, but you never would have known who they were. So there just was no grandeur down here. That was Watch Hill. We were pretty simple, I think, over here.
What can you tell me about 38 Hurricane?
Let's see, we were in Philadelphia.
How about Carol, 54? You were probably here for that.
Yeah,
weren't
we
you?
were here, but I was in Boston
The day it
working.
hit.
Yeah. So, and we saw it when it came down for the weekend and that kind of thing. But that one, the hurricane, the 38 one was the major one because we worried so about.
The 54, the water came all the way up over where
Yeah,
we were
I know
sitting,
that.
all the way up to the
Yeah,
doors, but
yeah.
not quite over the threshold.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have some terrific pictures taken by somebody from the inside of the inn
Yeah.
during the storm. And
Jimmy Slimmer would probably know.
that's good. We'll let him talk
Yeah.
to that.
Did
Yeah.
you do any midnight moon sailing?
Only down the pond for our picnics.
How? So, what do you mean? When
Well, we'd set forth, we'd take our lunch, and we could
so one telephone.
one telephone, and they'd line up.
Wow. So
No telephones in the room. And
Oh wow.
no, nothing in the.
was there always a line for the telephone, or just a certain time of the day?
Well, generally after dinner. There'd be a lineup, or in the morning sometime. No, there was nothing here.
So there was less families that stayed and more elderly.
No, I think families came, but you know, you couldn't possibly come to that inn today.
Right.
I mean, you have to have your computers, and you got to have television, and you got to have phones, and of course we'd all have cell phones today. But there was no telephone, and the rooms, you could practically hear somebody breathe in the next room. I mean, the inn went up so fast, and I can remember Mr. Arthur Perry. He was related to the Buffums. He was a Boston businessman or a banker, and I think he put a lot of pressure on Uncle Fred to get going. You could not miss a season, or you'd lose it. And that inn was built in a hurry. But of course it had all the people that were fine craftsmen because of the Depression. They didn't have work, so to get a job here was really a good thing. Great for them, and they built it fast.
Did you come down during the off-season while it was being built and see it in progress and see
No.
it swarming with people?
No, we were in Philadelphia, so we didn't.
Bob mentions in his book that there was just like an army of people, and the sound of hammering nails wasn't so much bang bang as it was a continuous roar of hammer hits.
Yeah.
It took me 13 months from the state of Rhode Island to get permission
Yeah.
to do less than they'd already given me permission to do. And this was
Well,
built in
just,
6 months.
yeah.
And the drawings actually are on the wall in here. The final signed drawing with Frederick Kaufman's signature.
Yeah.
They're in late February. This
Yeah.
place was basically put up in 90 days.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It is astonishing.
And they were great craftsmen.
Yeah, it's well built.
We had them here in Westerly. They sure
Especially
did.
the stonemasons.
Yep. Yeah. We had the quarry people.
Yeah.
So what's your fondest memory of the summer here?
Oh, well, I think most every summer when I came, I could hardly wait to get here. And we'd sing the Dr. Ogilvy's "Savior of the World," the last hymn, and we'd almost all be in tears because we knew we had to go home and go to school. That was the
And
final hymn.
and how does that song go? Do you mind?
Well, it's to the tune. It's to that Irish tune of what is it?
Danny Boy.
Danny
Boy.
Yeah. Now we have a new Weekapaug song.
And the motorboat song?
Oh,
That's what we were.
listen what the motorboat is saying. Put, 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 puttering along. Put, 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 put your arms around me. Put, 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 put your lips to mine. I'm sure that was one of Dr. Ogilvy's. And Sandy and I tipped over. I was sailing. He was probably 9 and I was 11. I was the skipper. And he kept telling me, I don't know why I listened to him. He said, you can make it. You can make it, Ange. You can make that person's bow. Well, we didn't, of course. We hit him. And, of course, we were at fault. And our mast broke. They got caught in our stay. And we were like this. And then when the mast broke, we flipped in to the water. So Davy Jones. And when Dr. Ogilvy, his father, pricked him in the back, it hurt.
What's this prick in the back thing?
Well, when they beat Davy Jones' locker, he put he had the safety pin and the lifesaver. That was what you got when you joined the Davy Jones' locker, and you tipped over.
So you mean he stuck you with a safety pin?
Yeah.
I hope you dipped it in alcohol.
And no, it wasn't that. The boys all had to, lean over like that. The girls got theirs pinned up here.
But still on their skin?
No, on there.
Oh,
on
okay.
The
So it was stuck in the fanny with a needle?
Yeah, but he always pricked Sandy a little harder than he would anybody else.
I heard it said that Sandy was picked on by his brothers.
They were terrible to him. But he did nasty little things too. Was no angel.
Retaliated. That's good.
But I can see him now pedaling his bike over here. Come over here as fast as he could in the morning. He never go home.
Not to his brothers.
And of course, one was the bishop. So, anything else you'd like to ask me?
I would just like to ask you to keep going and continue to free associate. And these are terrific stories, and we've gotten more material from you than we'll probably get from everybody else combined.
Well, you probably get a lot. I would think you get a lot from Jimmy, because he...
Yeah, I think I will too. Apparently Jim has been so excited by this. This is from Julie and from Jim's son, whose first name is Tony.
Andrew?
Yes, Andrew. Yeah, that's right. That apparently Jim's been walking around talking to himself for days.
Oh, really?
Trying to think about it.
Yeah, because he was right here all the time.
Yeah, that'll be terrific. Indeed. Thank you very much for doing it.
All right. Thank you.
Do you need a ride home?
No, I'm going to walk.
I am recording.
Hello everyone, I am Pootie Houston Maynard. I came to Weekapaug in 1929, if anybody has ever heard of that year. My parents had stopped going that very year, had stopped going to Hyannisport and brought me here as a new baby. We stayed in a cottage at the old inn, and we loved it, but that year and the next year I didn't like the sound of the waves, the crashing, and I guess I cried a lot, so I was a pain in the neck. So they weren't sure I liked Weekapaug, but I did grow to like it, you can be sure of that. I grew up to love big waves, and when the beaches were closed during storms and hurricanes, we teenagers later used to hike it over to the Misquamicut private homes that are right on the beach. We didn't need a lifeguard. Well, maybe we needed one, but we didn't have a lifeguard. In fact, I vividly remember helping rescue Angie Groton when she didn't like the big waves over there. She went, but I guess she got in and changed her mind. Anyway, the other thing I do remember about the old inn is the Saturday night dances. I obviously didn't start that in 29, but my dad taught me to dance there, and it was always fun for little people, and they made a fuss over us all, so we thought it was high flying. So that was one of the beauties of the old inn. I'm trying to think what else. I went to Camp Weekapaug, which was a day camp, and I remember vividly Dan Mitchell picking me up in his station wagon, brown station wagon. I think it was old, I'm not sure. And we learned to swim right there at the camp on the beach beyond the inn. And we learned to swim in the pond behind me here. It's salt water, but there were lots of jellyfish. And they put up a wired area. They put up wires and netting to try to keep the jellyfish out. And we learned to swim in the netting. It didn't appeal to me a great deal, but I guess I learned to swim pretty well. I think yes, that was kind of my conclusion with the old inn, because I was pretty young. We did go on to rent a house when I was still young on Winona. I didn't think of this earlier, and I enjoyed it very much. And that's where Dan Mitchell picked me up to go to camp. But when the war came, my dad felt he had to stay on campus at RPI where he was president, and therefore he didn't feel he could go away for the summer, and so they sent me off to camp. You know, you have to get rid of the kid. My two sisters were older, 10 and 12 years, so they didn't have to worry about them. I don't know what they did those summers, but I went to Pine Log Camp and loved it. Went for 7 years. And when I came home after 7 years, they said, well, it's time that we go back to a summer spot to enjoy. And I said, well, I'm so tired of you all talking about my sister's gangs. Let's go find me a gang. You don't approve of my individual friends here and there. Get me a gang. So we went looking for a gang for Pootie that summer. And we started at Fisher's Island. And when I won the lucky number dance, Dad thought, oh, this is it. She's going to want to be at Fisher's. So we rushed around, found a beautiful house he was thinking of buying. And then we went to Watch Hill. And they showed us a cottage, house, whatever you want to call it, that had the largest staircase I've ever seen. And when you got on the second floor, there was a humongous ballroom. And I thought, what am I going to do in a house with a ballroom on the second floor? I really basically was a shy individual, and the whole thing kind of horrified me. So we came over to Weekapaug, moved into the inn, got in our bathing suits, and went down to the inn beach. And on the boardwalk to the inn beach, Ann Demarest was coming off, and she stopped and said, Mr. and Mrs. Houston, I haven't seen you in years. How lovely to see you. And my goodness, she said, smiling at me, this must be Pootie all grown up. So that was very friendly and nice, and I appreciated it. We had our swims and went home eventually for our dinner. And Dad said, okay, decision time. What does Pootie choose of the 3 places? And guess what I said? Somebody smiled at me in Weekapaug. I want to go to Weekapaug where they smile. So we did. And the Whitesels were about to move into their newly built house, and we're moving out of the house I'm in at the moment. So we moved in August 1st, which was absolutely terrific. I had fun, kind of. I'd go to the beach and join the circle of teenagers, and I'd come home from the beach. Not a great deal occurred during that time. Most of the guys my age were still at war, so they hadn't come home yet. But I, being shy, didn't get to know a lot of the guys anyway. And when it got to be Labor Day, 2 of the older guys got together and decided they'd take me together. It was Bob Slimman and Henry Pogue. And they just nicely invited me to join them. And after we had danced at the inn for a short time, they said, now it's traditional for us to leave here and go to Watch Hill, where we can get drinks and things and some excitement. And on the way, they said, and what we like to do first on Labor Day is crash the gardener's party up on the hill, on the point in Watch Hill. And I said, crash the party? that we weren't invited to, says naive little Pootie. Yes, Pootie, just relax. You're with us. So in we went and greeted people we didn't know. And before I knew it, I was dancing with a Wachio gentleman. And I looked up, and the police had arrived. And they were escorting my 2 escorts out the door. So at least I had the common sense to excuse myself and say that the police were taking my escorts away, and I guessed I better go to the police station with them. And I joined them, and we were scot-free, but we'd been there, and the guys thought that was the greatest accomplishment. Then we could go to the Misquamicut Club and finish the evening on an even keel. But that's the way it worked on Labor Days. I guess I never did it again later, but that was my first experience of crashing anything. Let's see. Oh, at the end of the summer, Dad announced at dinner that this was before I'd gone and crashed the party, actually, but the summer was over, and Dad announced that the owners of the house we were renting had agreed to rent it to him again next year. And I left the table in tears and ran upstairs, and he said, "What's wrong with her? Didn't she like it? Did she try to have a good time?" And Mother said, yes, she tried. She went down, joined the circle, put her towel down, and then when it was time, she picked her towel up and went home, and that was the end of it every day. Well, anyway, that was the first year. Believe me, after that, things were quite different. A lot of people came home from the war, and it was pretty exciting. But I wasn't sure I liked it that first summer. Maybe crashing the party helped me. Let's see, when I returned from camp, I guess, I was a teenager now, obviously, 7 years older, and I crewed for Jim Slimman twice a week in his sneak box, and of course he won every race, won all the big awards. But my favorite story is when we were going before the wind one time, he asked me if I would take the whisker pole and put it out on the jib, which I thought I carefully did. And when I let go of it, it flew out into the water, but it floated right by our boat. So Jim calmly reached over, picked it up, and said, "Try again." Surprised he didn't shoot me or beat me, but he didn't appear to hold it against me at the time. He must have been furious. But I don't think we lost too much on that. So I wasn't the greatest crew, but I guess we managed, because he sure did win. I also dated Bob Buffum, whose parents were running and owned the Weekapaug Inn, and it was a new inn by then, which had been built across the pond from the beach on the ocean where it had been. And Bob used to take me to the Matunic shows, the musicals in Matunic, in his Model A car. And he used to pretend that the Model A had broken down, and I was supposed to get out and push while he steered. He got away with murder a lot of times, I'll tell you. Anyway, that's a great memory too. Typical Bob. He likes to play jokes on people. We went regularly to the Matunic shows. We danced Saturday nights at the New Inn.
No, that's distracting. Hold on 1 second. Should we pay them?
No. Together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't said anything about your memories of the old inn and if you did anything in there, by there, or on the beach. I know you were that much younger then.
I said
And
that
you went away to camp or
I
something.
learned to dance there, I told you.
With your dad.
With my dad.
Okay.
At the Saturday night dances.
Okay. Yes.
What more do you want me to do? Get up and demonstrate?
No.
Oh, wait, you can only tell me what's true.
Was the camp part of the inn?
No, it was not.
Okay.
It was separate. And I mentioned Dan picking me up. Dale Crooker ran it. And there was somebody else, a gal from Weekapaug. It's not coming to me quickly, but Dio Crooker owned it and ran it.
How old were you when you were dancing with your dad?
Well, it was between 29 and 39, so I was under 10. Does that make sense? 6, 7,
Yeah,
8,
yeah.
9, 10, in that vicinity. And by then, probably living, as I told you, on Winona.
Did you have memories, or was there an impact to you of the hurricane? Either the 38 or Carol, 54?
38 hurricane, I was in Troy, New York.
So you would have felt at least the brushing.
And Dad called from his office and told Mother not to let me go into my bedroom because he thought the 4 large trees in the backyard would fall on my bedroom.
Oh.
But I wasn't down here. We had a sneak box, and it was stored, I believe, in the yacht club. And it was washed across the pond somewhere. And Dad drove down after the hurricane and picked it up and took it back to Troy. So we had it on the lake outside Troy.
It survived.
It survived.
Okay.
It
It washed across the.
Just took a trip across
the
pond.
Yeah.
It survived. I don't know how much damage was actually done. I'm not sure there was much. I just think it rode the waves over.
Oh, yeah.
Probably had a better trip than when we were sailing it.
Quicker one. Indeed.
It didn't go aground as we used to do in the shallow part here.
What was the inn like to you later on when you were married and you were here in the summertime and, well, either inn. I mean, you weren't married when the old inn was up because you were only 9 years old. But
Mary who?
Well, no, when you were married, after you came down here and were married and so on, what was there anything that should be said about couples' life in Weekapaug as the inn affected it? That's a terrible sentence, I apologize.
I got your train of thought. I was married in the Weekapaug Chapel, and you might be interested to know that the day before I was married, since Mother had never had me christened, I had to be christened because the minister...
By Remsen?
The minister was, no, it was Angie's father.
Oh, Groton.
Groton.
He was here. I didn't know that her dad was a minister too. Oh, okay.
And anyway, I was christened with my husband-to-be standing beside me. I think that's fairly unusual. I don't know. But I loved having the wedding in the chapel. It really was delightful. And the chapel was kind of the center of the community and of all activities. We had suggested at one point, as a matter of fact, you may not want to include it, but we had suggested, because we liked sitting at a little table or something for lunch with our friends, that maybe the inn would like to do that and let us, the locals, come and do that.
To do what?
Let us come and sit and have lunch on their lawn or their terrace. They didn't have any interest in that. So they didn't promote that. But that came along, I think, a bit later. I think maybe Bob and Sid, I'm not sure. Sid could clarify when, but they discouraged it, if anything, and I thought that was too bad. So therefore, really, no, there wasn't anything drawing married couples, except the Saturday night dances if you wanted to come dance. And we maybe did that occasionally, I'm not sure.
Did your kids come and have an interaction, for instance, bingo games or whatever, that at the inn was...
It was at the yacht club.
Okay, yeah, I remember it as at the yacht club too, but...
Did somebody say it?
No, I think what somebody maybe... I don't remember. No.
They may have had bingo for their house guests.
The sun in your eyes?
No,
Oh,
no,
sorry.
doesn't bother me at all.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid there wasn't as much interaction as we'd like to think. I feel there was almost more when I was little.
Yes, certainly the way Angie talks about the old inn is that, and maybe just because she was very little at the time as well, that it seemed as though they were more in and out of the inn when it was out there on the beach than what has been described since. And I know that the Buffums were running this place really only 10 weeks a year, and they really needed to make as much money as they possibly could. So they didn't, and so therefore they wanted to sell as many rooms as possible, and the meals were always included. It was full American plan. And they just didn't, it was my experience that coming over here for a meal was actually difficult to arrange, because generally the dining room was full up to here in high season. That has been my experience, but this isn't about this side of the camera. This is about your side.
Well, when we were in the cottage, the inn cottage, you see, we were part of the inn guest bit.
Yes.
So we probably were more involved as a result of that too. But
Sure.
of course I was pretty young. I think by the time I can remember anything, we'd gone to Winona. I'm fearful. I guess the thing I had written here was just concluding that I had pushed Bob's car home, and then I mentioned the Saturday night dances and the fact that the inn was dry, so that therefore we raced off to the Misquamicut Club to have a little libation. And the only other thing I had to add was that in addition to those two, I dated Ray Walsh for a while, and he was great on the softball games at the softball field up on the tennis courts. I don't know why I don't have great memories of the tennis. I do with my children, indeed. We all spent a lot of time at the tennis club and played a good deal of tennis, but I don't remember as a little girl. Maybe that's why I was never very good. I didn't know until I was 50, which has nothing to do with the old inn, except that I can only see out of one eye at a time, and that certainly made a difference in the tennis.
Really?
Yeah. That nobody ever bothered to tell me that I could only see out of one eye at a time. They ordered some machines for me as a little girl to do some exercises because I had one eye that went in. And by the time the machines came, the eye had stopped going in, so they said I didn't need to do them. Well, they were wrong in hindsight. I should have done the exercises because maybe I could have. But anyway, I've survived, and I even got through college without knowing. But I knew enough to pick my courses carefully because of that. And then I ended up getting married, as I said, in the chapel, and coming down every summer to visit family with children. And here I still am with my hearing aids and my great-grandchildren in the house next door to me. That's kind of my conclusion.
It's a great conclusion. Once you come here, you don't get out.
That's
This is
right.
the Hotel California.
Don't want to get out.
I hear. I agree.
That's right.
What do you think about what the kids do today with what you did as a child here? Think it's too much? Or not?
I don't know. I'm not as aware, perhaps, of. I think the tennis is marvelous. They've been having wonderful experiences there. My two grandchildren, two boys, Jim's children, are very involved in. They go to a camp at the Misquamicut Club, actually, but they also play in the tennis up here. I don't see them yet getting into trouble. I don't know.
Sailing? Do they sail?
They want to, yes. My children, my youngest got seasick, literally. Well, he got seasick. He got car sick a half a block from home. I mean, you know, he just is that way. And never developed any interest in my own children in sailing, which I was very sad about. I did leave something quite significant out. My dad had a Herreshoff, a 29-foot overall, and he loved to sail it out in the ocean, but he needed crew. So he counted on me to line up young men who would be the crew, which was fun for me because I could invite the guys to come sailing with us. And we did that many, many afternoons as teenagers.
Where was the boat kept?
He kept it in the Watch Hill Harbor.
Yeah.
And then he took it up the river. Can't think of the name of it.
Pawcatuck River.
Yes, for the winter.
Uh-huh.
That's where it wintered. And we have pictures and paintings of it, you know. It was called the Pelican.
Was it a Watch Hill 15?
It was a Fisher's Island Herreshoff, so it was bigger than the Watch Hill 15s.
So we're gonna introduce you to somebody you once knew. I'm gonna turn off the record.
Okay.
Are you fine? Do you need any?
I'm fine. And I had two dogs and the two guys. And I was hot and bothered, and I said, "Why won't you answer me, Hugh?" He'd never said a word.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and he said, "Mommy, me can't talk." Ooh. Said a whole sentence. And I had been saying to the doctors, he wants to talk and he can't, and they kept saying, "Oh no, he's just lazy." Well, anyway, the next thing I was going to tell you is that finally I talked to the doctor and said I ought to make it up to Carol. She was only 13 months older, and she lacked a lot of attention that a little guy gets.
Yes.
Because he was getting so much. And so the doctor and I agreed I would start mother-daughter days, which I did start, and we stopped at Lamb's store, which is where everybody stopped to get their mail.
I remember.
And there was Mom and my sister Nancy, and they were on their way to Westerly, and they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, we're out for a mother-daughter day. We're going to Westerly too." "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know. We're going to find something exciting." So they took off. They'd gotten their mail. We got our mail. 5 minutes later, we took off. And when we got to the corner at A1A, they had been in an automobile accident, and my mother had been killed.
Oh my God.
And I said to Carol, "You stay in the car." I kind of said it in a haughty voice, I remember, and I don't know why, except I was scared to death. And I think I wanted to stay in the car. I mean, I know I did. I didn't want to get out, but I went over, and my sister said, "She's knocked out, but she's alive. I feel a pulse." Well, I think she was dreaming, but anyway. She said, "Go get Dad." So I said, fine, that was a good mission for me. So Carol and I went back and got my dad, or told him, and so he could come in his own car. And the only thing I did right that day was I did not leave Carol with a babysitter that I already had for Huey. I kept her with me because I think, having seen it, if I had dropped her off as if she wasn't a part of it and she didn't need to know, I kept her with me, and we ended up in the emergency room at the hospital, sitting on the floor, and don't ask me why, but with my sister, and we were singing hymns. I don't know why you do the things you do when you do them, but that's what we did. And the bad part of the story that I did do wrong is I never remembered to have another mother-daughter day. And I recently said to Carol, "Why didn't you remind me?" And she said, "Mother, I didn't really know what we were doing." And of course she didn't at that age. How would she know what we were doing? So I feel bad. And that's all Weekapaug. Not the end.
That's entirely too poignant.
You don't want that? That's unhappy?
I think that's family business, and I don't think you want to share it, Rhonda, either.
Oh, I don't mind sharing it, but it's just part of Weekapaug to me. She was much too young to go. But do you know something interesting? I honestly believe that there's something involved in... She grew up before cars were around, And when the cars came, she learned to drive, got a driver's license, and she did drive. But she hated driving, and she didn't like riding with anyone else. She hated cars. She felt they were extremely dangerous.
This is Carol.
No, this is my mother.
Oh.
Do you see?
Yes.
I honestly believe they're premonitions like that.
I wouldn't argue with you.
It has to be, because all I could think when it happened, oh my goodness, she's hated cars all her life. No wonder. Here he comes.
Are we on
No
manual
wonder.
exposure? Is that what we're doing?
I still am.
Impression, you can't.
You can tell me all about it.
Well, I found out from our son, or somebody reminded me that we learned about Weekapaug through friends of my wife's father and mother. They lived in Pittsburgh, and they recommended that we come here and try it. And I found out, Mr. Wheeler it is?
Yeah.
That our son Fred reminded me that we came here first in 1960, or 60, maybe 61. So that's 53 years.
Oh, yeah.
It's 10 years after I graduated from college. I was already married. So I was Pootie Maynard.
That, I remember the bell rings. That's the name. As soon as Mr. Wheeler said he was going to meet you, I said, of course, we knew Pootie Maynard. Yes.
We didn't. I thought maybe
We just knew you here from having dinner together, I'm sure, from time to time. And at the time we lived in New Jersey. We lived in Short Hills, New Jersey.
And I probably asked you if you knew the Mercantons.
No,
Noli. No.
that goes back.
Noel. Growing up in Short Hills, that's what I.
We knew the Coxes.
The Coxes, you remember the Coxes?
Odin and
Odin. Oh,
Odin
yes.
and Denny Cox.
Denny, of course, is still
Ned
here.
and Odin and Denny, their daughter.
Yes, indeed.
And she still lives here. Or
Denny does.
Denny
Yes.
does.
Denny still, yeah.
Denny's still here. And Ned visits. He's, I think, in London.
is he a
Yeah, I think that's.
producer or a director of theater or an actor? Something
I'm
like
not
that?
sure, but I think of him as overseas. And he comes to Weekapaug to visit in the summer.
Ray Cox is maybe 70. Now, he was, certainly that's one family, and the dad was tennis coach at Duke, Bob, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And
But they aren't related, are
That's
they?
a different family. I don't think we knew
I
that.
don't think they're related.
I thought all the Coxes were one family. Okay, well,
It's
okay.
not
I'm
an uncommon name.
I
It's a
think
very
I
fairly
think of
common.
it as two different families, but they might be related.
Bob, for the could you? We're running live here, and we're going to edit this thing down and so on. But you said you've been coming since the '60s. Do we get a complete introduction? You're here now in 2014. Can you say what that circumstance is, please?
Well, having begun our enjoyment of the Weekapaug again that long ago, and having come for so many years, not every year for all those years in between, but many of them, it has become a place that is very dear to the hearts of all our family and our children. I mean, Fred was here when he was 6 or 7 years old, and his younger brother and his sister is 4 years younger than he, and then our younger son is now just 50. But the three of them began to love this place, as we all did over the years. We stayed at the inn itself many times, although I can't remember how many, because during that time period we elected to rent houses, and we'd take a house from typically mid-June until the end of July, and I'd commute. We lived in New Jersey. I'd go to work and come back on the weekends. And we would frequently eat here. We would eat at home quite often, but we enjoyed the inn. My wife's parents loved being here, My father-in-law loved the lawn bowling, which used to be up there years ago, as you know. We loved the other things such as Musquamacut, to which we had golf privileges, so we were able to play golf at Musquamacut, which was wonderful. But it just has a special warmth and feeling for all of us, which justified our, about a year ago I said to our family, wouldn't it be nice if we had a reunion? We think of this place as a place we would reunion. And we decided to come this year, so we have the entire family, which now numbers 13 of us. Our daughter and son-in-law have 3 children, they're here, and our son and daughter-in-law have 4 boys, so all 13 of us are here. I'm happy to be here.
When these airplanes come overhead, these mics aren't good enough, so let that guy get out a little bit further away. And don't lose your thought, Bob. Okay, you with me, Geri? Here we go. Sorry, go.
So, having arrived, the first, you just opened a year ago, and we were not here last year, but I can't tell you how pleased we were to see what has been done. The building itself has been restored, I guess, to its complete original size, and beautifully done. And what we liked very much is the pool, which takes the place of the tennis courts, because there's much more action with the pool, but it's beautifully done. So we're very happy to be here and enjoy the things that we remember from so many years ago.
Thank you. We're delighted that you've come back with those memories and not find your, you know how you never can go back in time.
Right.
And if this is not if this doesn't leave you with any sense of, you know, I remembered it was better, that's terrific, and I'm very pleased.
Well, the other things we fondly think of, for example, is at low tide going into the pond and going clamming, getting our own clams, take home a bucket of clams for dinner, right, Fred? Remember those days?
This boisterous group in that boat over there have been clamming. I have a feeling they found a few cans of beer with the clams.
Well, they've been there for 4 hours, I'll bet.
Yeah, I know.
And,
Get them on indecent exposure right now.
Yeah, those.
Yes.
they must be getting enough to sell them, I guess. That's more than just a personal few dinners they're collecting.
I think they're having a little fun today.
It's more beer.
Right.
Glad you two are facing in the last little incident that occurred out there.
Well, that's
We've
about
come
all I
back
can tell you.
Times since. Dad, you want to comment? You and Mom came back many times.
I'm sorry?
You and Mom came back many times since we were children. In fact, I remember teaching you how to windsurf out here one summer.
Yes, but again, I can't remember when that was or how recent it was.
Probably in the 80s.
I don't remember the last time we were here. I guess
2007.
But there was one time, just 5 or 6 or 8, 7 or 8 years ago?
2007.
7. And the time before that was 17 years ago, on my 70th birthday. So again, that was a reunion. It was a meaningful experience for us as a family to be able to come back.
That's what every summer is, a reunion.
Oh, you're right, Booty. That's
What?
right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, you reuned with the other families, and the inn had its regulars in the week or the month that you were here. If you come back next year at that same time, they'll be here.
Right.
And of course, Weekapaug is all about.
That.
I can remember 4 generations. I haven't met the baby yet. It will be 5 generations of Mitchells, from Danforth Mitchell. Clovis. I remember Clovis, his father.
I don't remember.
And Clovis, Danforth, Mary's son, Stephen, just had a baby. So, you know.
Well, we've known the Buffums, of course. Those are our closest friends.
Yeah.
You're related to the Buffums, did you say?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Friends.
Knew them very well just by being here, and Jim, of course, and Sydney, and the boys, and Buffy, and they all became very good friends.
Did your children play with the Buffums?
I guess that Fred might have more recollection of that. I guess they did.
My sister did with Buffy quite a bit. I think they're the same age, and I was older than the other kids. Rob, a little bit. We also visited them in Florida at their place down there.
At the Minnesota Beach Club, yeah. We've been there.
So you remember each other though, from coming here? Yeah.
We remember each other here. No, I only went briefly to the Minnesota Beach Club because we were on the other coast at Vero Beach. But I was thinking about
That's
family.
where we also saw you, because we have a place in Vero Beach. We had a place in Vero Beach.
You did? Whereabouts?
Yes. In the Riamar Sands apartments, and we belonged to Riamar Country Club 3 years. So we knew you down there. That's another bell that rang.
You'll get a big laugh out of this. I oversimplified it when people kept saying I don't understand all the different parts of Vero Beach. So I thought for a minute and I said, well, the sailors, I guess, go to the moorings.
Mm-hmm.
The tennis players
go to Sea Oaks.
And the golfers, where are you going to put them? At
Riamar.
John's Island? No. At Riamar, I put all the nice people. How about that? I thought that everyone I met at Riamar was exceptionally nice.
Was it okay that if I'm a nice people and I played golf? Is that all right?
Well, it was all right to play golf, sure, because they played at the moorings and John's Island, and Anyway,
I do remember.
I was at Baytree.
Right. What was your husband's name?
Fred.
Fred
Maynard.
Got it.
But I was thinking about reunions because we've ended up now with 4 houses in Weekapaug, isn't that?
You don't need the inn for your reunions.
No, we don't.
Her son Fred has had a very successful career, and he's building an empire on Wawalong Road.
What do you call it? What do they call theirs at Hyannisport? The compound.
Your compound, yeah.
So we have a compound.
Yeah, you're working on it, that's for sure.
Working on it, but we have one that's off the compound. I don't know what street it's literally on. Is it Winona?
The one that's off the compound? I would say it's the corner of Noisneck and Knowles.
Okay, I think you're right.
I think that's correct.
You're right. Winona's closer to the ocean.
Yeah, indeed.
Not very smart.
What brought you to the inn first? Did you hear about it, or?
The first time?
The first time? Yeah.
References from my wife's parents who lived in Pittsburgh. They suggested we try it, so I think her parents and we came for the first time in the early 60s and stayed here, and then started going to the houses.
It was kind of unusual insofar as it didn't have modern things like telephones and television. Go.
So, having arrived for the first, you just opened a year ago, and we were not here last year, but I can't tell you how pleased we were to see what has been done. The building itself has been restored, I guess, to its complete original size, and beautifully done. And what we liked very much is the pool, which takes the place of the tennis courts, because there's much more action with the pool, but it's beautifully done. So we're very happy to be here and enjoy the things that we remember from so many years ago.
Well, thank you. We're delighted that you'd come back with those memories and not find your, how you never can go back in time.
Right.
And if this is not if this doesn't leave you with any sense of, I remembered it was better, that's terrific. I'm very pleased.
Well, the other things we fondly think of, for example, is at low tide going into the pond and going clamming, getting our own clams, take home a bucket of clams for dinner, right, Fred? Remember those days? And,
this boisterous group and that boat over there have been clamming I have a feeling they found a few cans of beer with the clams.
Well, they've been there for 4 hours, I bet.
Yeah, I know.
Get them on a decent exposure right now.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yes.
They must be getting enough to sell them, I guess. That's more than just a personal few dinners they're collecting.
I think they're having a little fun today.
Get some more beer.
Right.
I'm glad you two are facing in for the last little incident that occurred out there.
Well, that's
We've
about
come
all I
back
can tell
several
you.
times since. Dad, you want to comment? You and Mom came back many times.
I'm sorry?
You and Mom came back many times since we were children. In fact, I remember teaching you how to windsurf out here one summer.
Yes, but again, I can't remember when that was or how recent it was.
Probably in the 80s.
I don't remember the last time we were here. I guess
2007.
But there was one time, just 5 or 6 or 8, 7 or 8 years ago?
2007.
7. And the time before that was 17 years ago, on my 70th birthday. So again, that was a reunion. It was a meaningful experience for us as a family to be able to come back.
That's what every summer is, a reunion.
Ah, you're right, Pootie. That's
What?
right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, you reuned with the other families, and the inn had its regulars in the week or the month that you were here. If you come back next year at that same time, they'll be here.
Right.
And of course, Weekapaug is all about. I can remember 4 generations. I haven't met the baby yet. It will be 5 generations of Mitchells, from Danforth Mitchell. Clovis. I remember Clovis, his father.
I don't remember.
And Clovis, Danforth, Mary's son, Stephen, just had a baby. So, you know.
Well, we've known the Buffons, of course.
Sure.
Those are our closest friends.
Yeah.
You're related to the Buffons, did you say?
No.
Oh.
Close friends.
Knew them very well just by being here. And Jim, of course, and Sydney, the boys, and Buffy, and we became very good friends.
Did your children play with the Buffons?
I guess that Fred might have more of a recollection of that. I guess they did.
My sister did with Buffy quite a bit. I think they're the same age. And I was older than the other kids, Rob, a little bit. We also visited them in Florida at their place down there.
And at the Minnesota Beach Club, yeah. Right there.
So you remember each other though? From coming here? Yeah.
We remember each other here. No, I only went briefly to the Minnesota Beach Club because we were on the other coast at Vero Beach. But I was thinking about family.
That's where we also saw you, because we have a place in Vero Beach. We had a place in Vero Beach.
We did? Whereabouts?
Yes, in the Riamar Sands apartments, and we belonged to Riamar Country Club for years. So we knew you down there. That's you to the bell that rang.
You'll get a big laugh out of this. I oversimplified it when people kept saying I don't understand all the different parts of Vero Beach. So I thought for a minute and I said, well, the sailors, I guess, go to the moorings. Mm-hmm. The tennis players
go to
Sea Oaks, and the golfers, where are you going to put them? At
Riamar.
John's Island? No. At Riamar, I put all the nice people. How about that? I thought that everyone I met at Riamar was exceptionally nice.
Was it okay if I'm a nice people and I played golf? Is that all right?
Well, it was all right to play golf, sure, because they played at the moorings and John's Island, and Anyway,
I do remember.
I was at Baytree.
Right. What was your husband?
Fred.
Fred
Maynard.
Got it.
But I was thinking about reunions because we've ended up now with 4 houses in Weekapaug, isn't that?
You don't need the inn for your reunions.
No, we don't.
Her son Fred has had a very successful career, and he's building an empire on Wawalome Road.
what do you call it? What did they call theirs at Hyannisport? The
Kennedys,
compound.
their compound, yeah. Yeah,
So we
indeed.
have a compound.
Yeah, you're working on it, that's for sure.
Working on it, but we have one that's off the compound. I don't know what street it's literally on. Is it Winona?
The one that's off the compound? I would say it's the corner of Noyes Neck and Knowles.
Okay, I think you're right.
I think that's correct.
You're right.
Yeah,
Winona's
yeah.
closer to the
Yeah,
ocean.
yeah, indeed, indeed.
Very smart.
What brought you to the inn first? Did you hear about it, or?
The first time you back in the
first time?
60s?
Yeah.
References from my wife's parents who lived in Pittsburgh. They suggested we try it, so I think her parents and we came for the first time in the early 60s and stayed here and then started going to the houses.
It was kind of unusual insofar as it didn't have modern things like telephones and televisions, and
we used to
outhouses.
I used to kid my wife. I said to my wife one time, how can we be spending whatever it was, $300 a night?
Yes.
I'm standing in this tub with claw feet and a little drape around the inside of it, and there's water out of the shower was just dribbling down on my head. We came because it was the food and the atmosphere and everything else about it, but when we heard it was going to be redone, we figured, well, maybe it's about time. But we enjoyed it. That was unimportant. The place was more important than little things like that.
You didn't have to use an outhouse.
No.
Our house had an outhouse when we first got there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, happy to contribute, and Prudy, nice to see you again.
Nice to
really.
see you.
Good. I think we'll be getting geared up fairly soon for the cookout.
Yes, they want us out of here. They want to light the coals.
All right, we'll move on now. I did think of something more.
You did?
I can't remember it now.
I'm live.
Have your previous guests talked about the seasonal employment at all? The nature of the summer staff?
No.
No? Okay.
The previous guests have been Angie and Sid Buffum and Ted Goodwin. And the original objective was just to capture the 4 or 5 oldest people in town who can give us the best memories before we can't talk to them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And God willing, that shall not be your situation for 50 more years. Well, 40. But that's what we were dealing with, and that's what the rush was to get it done. And we still want to do Jim Slimmons and Pootie Maynard, and maybe Lois Boignet, if we can. I haven't seen her yet this summer to ask her. But you have lots of old stories. Why don't you just tell us about
When you started at the inn?
Yeah, tell us when you started. What were the circumstances? How long you were here? What did you do? And sort of what was the ambiance that would make a viewer chuckle or perhaps recall?
Introduce yourself.
Where should I look?
His camera.
Oh, yeah.
Either
And
one.
his camera.
Okay.
And then say your name and who you are. And where are you born?
To the extent that you have deep westerly Weekapaug roots, that should be part of your introduction of yourself.
So it's rolling. I'm Mark Bollinger. I'm the naturalist and director of recreation here at the Weekapaug Inn. I've been with the inn since it reopened in 2012, but before that, back in 1977, 1978, I worked here as a teenager. So in those early years, in '77, I was a junior in high school, and I got the job. I actually got the job the fall before. I had sent a letter to Bob Buffum seeking a job, and over Thanksgiving break, he asked me to come up and interview. So I remember getting my best sweater out of the closet, and my parents brought me up for Thanksgiving and had an interview over at the Buffum's house here. And several months later, I got a letter offering me a job, and like most boys coming into the inn, I started in the kitchen. Almost all the guys started with a kitchen job, or maybe a houseboy who moved furniture around. And after a year of doing fundamentally back at the house work, we got to switch to the front of the house. So my first year I was a pot washer in the kitchen. And just sort of as an aside, the way the summertime staffing worked here was the inn had a core of professional people who included the chef and the kitchen staff, head housekeeper, at times the manager or assistant manager, and these people would go back and forth from the inn to the wintertime.
Hi, here's your passenger.
Oh, hello.
How you doing?
Good. Ready for your tour?
Sorry to disturb your,
No problem.
We can do this. We'll get.
He's not really that photogenic, you know. I mean,
We asked him to leave the house.